ordinary plumber to a member of royalty. You may now address me as King John. I make this claim because I went to my dentist this past Tuesday and had a crown put on one of my upper molars. Pun intended. And the puns just keep coming. This dental appointment was the crowning moment in a long process that began with the discovery of a deep cavity, then continued with a temporary filling, a root canal, and a temporary cap before I finally got my coveted crown. Now, what sounds like a terrible ordeal really wasn't, because I have such great confidence in my dentist. I know she's done her homework and that I'm placing my teeth in competent hands. You see, when I recline in a dentist chair, I not only look at the ceiling, I also look at the walls. And what I'm looking for is not a Picasso print or a prize-winning photograph. I'm looking for a diploma and a certificate. I'm looking for tangible evidence that my dentist is qualified to work on my teeth. I want to know that he or she has a degree from a reputable dental school and the certification of her peers. My own dentist has these qualifications in spades. So today I wear my crown proudly and confidently. I trust that all of us here want to be led and served by people who are qualified to do their jobs. We want to elect candidates who have the right stuff to serve in public office. We want to hire employees who have the requisite skills to fulfill their job descriptions. Ideally, we even want experienced, competent people to serve in volunteer organizations like the church. On the one side, we're concerned that others be qualified to lead and serve us. And on the flip side, we're concerned that we be qualified when we're asked to lead and serve others. Sometimes this means that we say yes to a particular calling, and sometimes it means that we say no. A year and a half ago, it was announced that our church would be sending volunteers on a mission trip to Ecuador in May of 2018. When I heard this news, my first reaction was, I'm thrilled that we're enlisting people to go and do challenging work on the mission field. But I'm not qualified. I knew what kind of work is typically done on mission trips. Work that requires specialized skills in carpentry, masonry, plumbing, electronics. I have some specialized skills, but certainly not in those areas. You never want to call on me to frame in a new closet or fix a broken commode. Of course, I knew that mission trips may also involve teaching Bible classes for children or training new, inexperienced clergy, tasks which would seem to be right up my alley, right? But on a mission trip to Ecuador, all of this would have to be done in fluent Spanish. And my Spanish was rusty at best. And so a year and a half ago, my position was, I believe in overseas missions, and I support others who make mission trips, but I don't feel qualified to be a missionary myself. Well, I wound up going on a mission trip to Ecuador. First and foremost, because I felt called by God to go. And I was inspired by the example of my church peers. And second, I made the trip because these same peers assured me that there would be plenty of work to do that would be doable for an unskilled laborer like myself. And they were right. I was assigned tasks that were well within my skill range, like painting furniture, the walls of church buildings, and providing non-medical assistance in health clinics. I was never asked to do carpentry or masonry because our leaders knew, and more importantly, I knew that I wasn't qualified. When you stop and think about it, one of the marks of maturity for all of us is to know our limitations and live within them. There are, in fact, many jobs that I'm not qualified to do. I'll never attempt to be an auto mechanic, a computer technician, or the next quarterback of the New England Patriots when Tom Brady finally decides to retire. I would be mismatched to any of these tasks. By the same token, you have many skills, but you also have limitations, and you've learned when to say no. At first glance, we do ourselves a favor, and we do others a favor by declining to do things we're not trained or equipped to do. But on second thoughts, there are times when you and I are asked to perform a service, and the obvious answer is no, but the right answer is yes. A prime example in the Bible is when God confronts Moses in a burning bush out in the desert, calling him to go back to Egypt and demand the release of his fellow Israelites from slavery. Moses' response is a classic. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Here, the reason for Moses' reluctance seems to be obvious. He once killed a military officer in Egypt, fled that country as a fugitive, and doesn't want to return there and have to face the music. But in point of fact, when Moses resists God's call, he's not being cowardly, he's being realistic. It seems that Moses speaks with a stutter and knows his limitations as a public speaker, which does not bode well either for negotiating with the Pharaoh or for leading his own people. As it turns out, God sees other strengths in Moses that make him an ideal liaison to both parties. But at this point, Moses doesn't recognize these strengths. He says, in effect, God, it's great that you want to send a leader to liberate my people, but I'm not qualified to be that leader. Notice, he doesn't insist that he's morally tainted or spiritually shallow, which would make him a poor candidate to represent God to the Egyptians or the Israelites. He doesn't say, God, I once murdered a man, so I'm unworthy to be your mouthpiece. No, the qualification he believes he lacks is a specific skill. The skill of public speaking and persuasion. Now, fast forward to today's scripture lessons and look at the three prominent figures we meet there. The prophet Isaiah, the apostle Paul, and the disciple Peter. Like Moses, each receives a specific call from God, and each replies in so many words, God, I approve of the work you're calling me to do, but I'm not qualified to do it. However, unlike Moses, the three men in today's readings do not claim to be lacking in skill. None of them have a handicap in speech, and all of them are experienced, accomplished leaders. No, their hesitation to answer God's call is rooted in something else. Isaiah has the grand vision of God in the temple. and is struck by his own unworthiness, crying, "There's no hope for me. I'm doomed, because every word that passes my lips is sinful." Paul sees the risen Lord and confesses, I'm the least of all the apostles, and don't even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church. And then Simon Peter gets a glimpse of the power of Christ and falls before him in the profound grip of his own shortcomings. "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man." Do you hear it? Isaiah, Paul, and Peter feel unqualified to serve God, not because they lack ability, but because they lack attributes that are more deeply personal, namely a clean heart, a pure character, an unblemished track record. These three men know they have the practical skills and the professional credentials to be effective leaders, but feel that they are not qualified spiritually or morally to answer God's call. This may come as a surprise to you, but I don't know any pastor worth his or her salt who feels differently. Of course, when God calls persons to ordained ministry, they may be ambivalent about saying yes, because, like Moses, that they lack a certain skill set. Many of you heard me say that I am not a natural-born public speaker. However, when God's call came to me about 50 years ago, I knew that I had other talents suitable for ministry. And I also realized that with enough training and practice, I would eventually grow more comfortable in the pulpit. But this is really beside the point. The issue that most ministry candidates struggle with is not, am I good enough as a speaker, but rather, am I good enough as a person? All of us who enter this profession have checkered pasts and complex personalities. We feel unworthy of our calling, and we let our unworthiness be known. Oh God, presumably you call men and women into ministry who meet the highest standards of spiritual maturity and moral purity. Now, for some reason, you called me, but I'm not qualified. Over the years, I've known a lot of laypersons who struggled with the same sense of unworthiness about performing roles of ministry in the church. As chair of the nominations committee, I've heard this line many, many times. "John, I'm complimented that you asked me to serve. And yes, I suppose I do have the skills to do this job. But something just doesn't feel right about it." For some of these folks, what doesn't feel right is what they feel about themselves. They're haunted by their dark sides, by the skeletons in their closets, by the secret sins that they're afraid for anyone else to know about, which leave them feeling unqualified to serve Christ's church. You think you know me, but if you only knew how wild I was back in college, how much I hate my boss, how I've mistreated my spouse and children behind closed doors, how rarely I pray. I mean, It doesn't matter whether you're clergy or laity. If the call to serve were contingent on personal worthiness, who among us would presume to serve? Some of you may have heard me tell the story of a man I once pastored who's now deceased, founding member and high-profile leader of a church I served in the mid-'80s in Jackson, Mississippi. He was a highly successful attorney who eventually threw his hat into the ring of politics. Before I arrived at that church and got to know him, he became the first viable candidate for governor in the state of Mississippi from the Republican Party, which up to that time had been dominated by Democrats, or more accurately, what we used to call Dixiecrats, remember? This man ran a strong race in the general election, but lost. And then, several months later, he lost much more than an election. He was indicted for campaign illegalities, which he forcefully and forever denied. Whether he was truly guilty or not, in the end, he was convicted by a jury and spent 6 months in a minimum security prison. When he got out, he was actually readmitted to the state bar and resumed his career as a lawyer. But he never resumed his role as an active member and leader in our church. He came to worship only on Christmas Eve and Easter Sunday, in each instance ducking out quickly after the benediction to avoid contact with old acquaintances. I reached out to him as a pastor, assuring him that if there was anything to forgive, he was forgiven, that he was still loved and respected by his church family, which he truly was, that we still valued his gifts for ministry and wanted him to share those gifts again with us. He always replied in so many words, "Thank you, but something just doesn't feel right about it." Which was just another way of saying, I'm qualified by skill and experience, but I'm not qualified as a human being. He saw himself as damaged goods. He felt permanently unworthy to assume any responsibility in public life, least of all in the life of the church. I left Jackson in 1988, still wishing that this man had internalized the stories of Isaiah, Paul, and Peter, which we're telling today. In the presence of a holy God, Isaiah declares himself to be unclean, but nevertheless is sent to preach. In the presence of the risen Christ, Paul declares himself unfit to be called an apostle of Christ. But by God's grace, he works harder than any of the others. In the presence of the power of Christ, Simon Peter confesses his sinfulness, but even so is called by Christ to fish for people. Where did these three deeply flawed men get the courage to answer yes to God's call? Or more to the point, how do they have the audacity to lead and serve others in light of who they are and what they've done? It's Paul who says it best. The same Paul who once mocked and murdered Christians. I am the least of the apostles. I do not deserve to be called an apostle. But that by God's grace, I am what I am. And the grace that He gave me was not without effect. What I've done as an apostle was not really my own doing, but God's grace working within me. Friends, when will we ever learn as lay and ordained ministers in the church? It is by God's grace that we are what we are. We're not called because we're worthy. We're worthy because we're called.